The galaxy had long forgotten the whispers of human legends. To them, Earth was a broken world, our fleets shattered, our people scattered among the stars. They said humanity had burned out in the dark, like a candle against a storm. But legends do not die so easily. From the void beyond charted space, something stirred. A signal, faint at first, pulsed through the silence. An old Terran code, one not heard in centuries. Entire empires froze as the impossible unfolded before their eyes. Against the endless black, lights appeared. Hundreds, then thousands. Ships, vast and unyielding, their hulls scarred by battles no one had dared imagine. The lost Terran Fleet had returned, and with it, the question every alien power swore would never be asked again. What happens when humanity, long dismissed and forgotten, steps back into the stars, stronger, darker, and more determined than before? Admiral Elias Kyle had grown up staring at stars he was never meant to touch. On the ruined surface of Earth, where glassed cities still whispered with the echoes of orbital bombardments, he'd learned early what it meant to be forgotten by the galaxy. His childhood was spent among the rusted skeletons of ships that would never fly again, in a city where the night sky was clearer than any data feed. But every bright point in it was a reminder of how small and abandoned humanity had become. The wars had ended long before his birth. The so-called Concord of Species, an empire stitched together by alien races who feared chaos more than justice, had sealed Earth's fate. Humanity was left in the dark, stripped of its fleets, mocked as a species of scavengers too stubborn to vanish, but too weak to matter. Yet Elias carried the bloodline of survivors. His mother repaired ancient engines in a scrapyard that once served as a naval dockyard. His father, a quiet man with haunted eyes, told stories of the Terran fleet that had vanished into deep space generations ago, stories no one believed anymore. They were called myths, bedtime lies told to keep children hopeful. But to Elias, those stories were lifelines. By the time he wore the uniform of the Terran Remnant Defense Corps, he knew his world's limits better than anyone. The Corps had no real fleet, just a handful of retrofitted civilian hulls, barely capable of patrolling the asteroid belts. Their ships were patched together with stolen parts and scavenged alien tech, running on ingenuity instead of resources. Humanity's warriors were guardians only in name, watching over a broken world with nothing left to lose. Elias was not a man who sought glory. He sought survival. Every morning he walked the cracked causeways of the old spaceport, past statues toppled by time, past plaques commemorating victories that no longer mattered. His duty was to train new recruits who barely knew what real combat was, boys and girls who had grown up hungry, angry, and desperate to believe humanity still had a place in the stars. And though he never said it aloud, Elias feared what all of them feared, that the galaxy had already forgotten humanity for good. But sometimes, forgetting is dangerous. For beyond the rim of known space, strange signals had begun to whisper across the void. Fragmented bursts of data, faint pings on long-dead frequencies, nothing substantial but enough to unsettle. Most dismissed them as radiation echoes, cosmic noise. Elias did not. He recognized the patterns. They were Terran in origin, ancient, almost impossible, but real. The alien Concord scoffed at the idea. "The Terran fleet is gone," they had declared long ago. "Lost to war, to darkness, to time." Yet on nights when Elias stood beneath the stars, he swore he could feel the pull of something vast and waiting. The myths his father had whispered, of ships too mighty to destroy, of captains who vowed to return when humanity needed them most, burned brighter than ever. Ordinary life carried on. The scrapyards clanged with broken steel. Children learned to fight with sticks where once they would have trained with rifles. And Elias drilled his recruits until their muscles ached, teaching them discipline, courage, and the stubborn refusal to yield, traits that were the only weapons humanity had left. But beneath the routine, the storm was building, because the signals were growing stronger, because somewhere, out in the dark, legends were stirring. And when legends awaken, the galaxy learns to fear what it has forgotten. The first time the alien Concord noticed the signal, they laughed. To them, it was a ghost, a distortion bouncing off nebula clouds. 1,000 species had risen and fallen in the void. Why should humanity be any different? They dismissed it with the same contempt they had shown since Earth's defeat. But Admiral Elias Kyle didn't laugh. He stood in the command deck of the Resolute, one of the few remnant patrol ships still limping across the black, and he felt the hairs rise on his neck. The code streaming through the comm channels wasn't random. It was structured, military, Terran, and it was moving. The data bursts weren't stationary echoes. They were shifting, as if someone, or something, was traversing the void, broadcasting a steady heartbeat into the dark. "Admiral, with respect," his comms officer whispered, eyes wide. "This frequency hasn't been used in 200 years. Elias only nodded. 200 years. And yet it's alive. The decision before him was impossible. To pursue the signal meant leaving their fragile patrol routes undefended, abandoning colonies that barely clung to survival. To ignore it meant admitting humanity's myths were nothing but lies. Elias chose pursuit. They followed the ghost across systems, burning fuel reserves they could not afford to waste. The Resolute was no warship. Her hull groaned with every jump, her weapons outdated by centuries. Yet something in the signal called to them like gravity. The galaxy noticed. An ardent claw strike cruiser intercepted them near the Ceres Rift. The feline predators of the Concorde were quick to mock. On the view screen, the alien commander sneered, baring teeth like knives. "Terran scrap should not wander beyond its grave. Return to your husk world, human, before you vanish as your ancestors did." Elias stood firm. "We're chasing a Terran code. You'll stand aside." Laughter rumbled through the comms. "There are no Terran codes. Only Terran lies. The ardent ship-powered weapons. The Resolute could not win a direct fight. Elias knew it. His crew knew it. Yet surrender was not an option. With steady breath, he issued his orders. Divert power from life support to engines. Route all cooling through the hull plating. Prepare the grav lances. It was madness. Their makeshift grav lances, a crude weapon of focused mass distortion, were unreliable at best, suicidal at worst. But Elias understood one truth the aliens had forgotten. Humans thrived in desperation. The Resolute feigned retreat, her thrusters sputtering as though crippled. The ardent ship moved to flank, overconfident, hungering for the kill. "Now," Elias whispered. The grav lances fired. Invisible tidal forces slammed into the enemy cruiser, warping metal, shattering conduits. The ship twisted as though a giant hand had crushed it, breaking in silence before erupting in fire. Gasps filled the bridge. Against every odd, a Terran relic had destroyed a predator's pride. Word spread like wildfire. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy whispered the unthinkable. Humans had struck back. The Concorde dispatched fleets to intercept. They declared the Terran remnants rogue aggressors, a threat that must be stamped out before old nightmares returned. But Elias knew it was too late. The nightmare was already awake. The signal had become a beacon now, blaring across the stars. And every jump brought the Resolute closer. At last, on the edge of the Perseid expanse, the void itself tore open. They found it. The fleet emerged like phantoms from a graveyard. Hull after massive hull slid from the shadows, vast warships older than empires, their plating scarred and blackened, yet their engines burning with steady fire. Terran dreadnoughts, carriers, escorts. hundreds of ships that should not exist. For a moment, no one breathed. It was impossible. Entire civilizations had risen since humanity's fall. And yet here it was, the Terran Fleet, returning from the abyss. The comms crackled. A voice, deep and unyielding, cut through the static. Terran command to all listening stations. We have kept our oath. Humanity returns. Elias's throat tightened. The myths had been true. His father's whispered tales were no bedtime lies. They were promises. But promises demanded blood. The conquered struck without hesitation. Thousands of alien warships converged on the expanse, determined to erase humanity's legends before they could spread. They threw fleets larger than the Terran remnants had ever seen, ships bristling with plasma batteries, particle cannons, and weapons designed to scour worlds. The galaxy expected humanity to falter, to crumble under overwhelming force. Instead, it witnessed something it had forgotten. Terran warfare. The old fleet did not fight with reckless fury. They fought with precision, with cold, terrifying efficiency. Human carriers launched squadrons of starfighters, weaving patterns no AI could predict. Dreadnoughts unleashed mass drivers that split cruisers in two with single volleys. Electronic warfare suites blinded alien sensors, turning order into chaos. And at the center of it all, Admiral Elias Kyle stood on the bridge of his humble Resolute, relaying data, coordinating maneuvers, his mind alive with a clarity he had never known. The old fleet did not shun him as an outsider, they accepted him as one of their own. The galaxy watched in horror as Terran steel carved through fleets that had once enslaved Earth. Yet victory was not certain. The conquered had numbers, endless numbers. For every alien ship that burned, 3 more took its place. Entire sectors lit with fire as the expanse became a graveyard of wreckage. On the 3rd day of battle, the Terran fleet began to falter. Ammunition reserves dwindled, shielding cores overheated, losses mounted. For the first time, Elias felt despair creeping in. But then, an impossible transmission. The hidden reserves of the fleet, scattered survivors across the stars, answered the call. Old Terran outposts, once thought destroyed, lit their engines. Sleeper colonies long forgotten reawakened. Civilians in scrap ships, smugglers in patched freighters, mercenaries in stolen hulls, all rallied to the signal. It was not just a fleet, it was a people. And that was the truth the galaxy had feared all along. Humanity was not dead. Humanity was not broken. Humanity had returned. On the bridge of the Resolute, alarms blared. A Concorde super-dreadnought, vast enough to eclipse moons, warped into the field. Its weapons glowed with the fire of stars, enough to annihilate what remained of the Terran formation. Elias stared at the monstrosity on the screen. This was the decisive moment. "Admiral," his officer whispered, trembling. "We can't stop that." Elias exhaled slowly, steady, unshaken. His eyes burned with the fire of every Terran who had ever refused to yield. "No," he said, voice steel. "But legends aren't meant to be safe. Prepare the fleet. Humanity stands. Here's the HFY resolution and impact for No One Feared Human Legends until the fleet returned from the dark, in a cinematic voice-over-ready style. 900 words. The silence that followed the battle was not silence at all. It was the hum of burned circuits, the groan of torn metal, and the distant crackle of fires clinging to the void. But to the survivors, it felt like silence, an almost sacred stillness, the kind that followed a miracle no one believed could ever happen. The Terran fleet drifted back into formation, battered but not broken. Ships once thought lost to time and myth now floated proudly beside their younger kin, their scarred hulls carrying the weight of centuries. and the weight of victory. The galaxy had expected humans to fall quietly into memory. Instead, humanity had returned from the dark. The allied worlds, who had whispered doubts and mocked human legend, now stared in awe. Their comms channels were filled with disbelief. They endured the dark alone? How can they fight like this? This is not possible. And yet, it was. Captain Alara stood at the viewport of the Dauntless, her face lit by the cold stars and the flickering wreckage of the enemy armada. She remembered what the Eldari ambassador had said months earlier, dismissive, almost pitying. Your species had its time. Legends do not win wars. But now, that same ambassador knelt on the comm feed, voice trembling with reverence. Humanity, forgive us. We did not know. Alara did not answer. Not yet. Because this was not about vengeance. It was about survival. About proving, to the galaxy and to themselves, that humans did not vanish when the lights went out. They adapted. They endured. And when the stars called them back, they rose. Reports came in. Entire sectors liberated, enemy fleets retreating in chaos, and allied systems rallying under the Terran banner. Everywhere the humans passed, whispers followed, old myths rekindled, old fears reborn. The galaxy remembered. Children of distant worlds began telling stories of the Terran ghosts who returned from exile, wielding warships as if they were extensions of their own will. Soldiers from alien armies, once hesitant to fight alongside humans, now begged to serve under their command, because humans had shown them something no empire, no dominion, no legend could erase. That hope survives in the darkest places. That courage endures even when the universe forgets your name. That humanity never stays buried. Alara finally spoke, her voice steady, echoing across every fleet comm, every allied channel, every listening ear in the galaxy. We are Terran. We are not myth, we are not forgotten, and we are not finished. Her words carried further than any weapon. They struck deeper than any fleet, because they reminded every species watching, ally or enemy, that legends are not just stories. Legends are warnings, and humanity had just written a new one. The fleet turned, engines burning bright, heading for the next battlefield. They were not chasing glory, they were answering a duty older than any empire, a duty to protect, to endure, to rise again when all others fell. The galaxy had feared nothing from the dark. But now, when the Terran banners rose like fire against the void, every corner of the stars whispered the same truth. No one feared human legends until they returned. And from that day forward, they never stopped fearing them again.